So our first order of business is practically open meeting order. Council needs to vote amongst the members that are in council chambers, a presiding member. Since Mayor McCordoff is out of the country and acting Mayor Bennett is not in council chambers this morning. So all of council can vote the presiding member from the 3 council members that are in council chambers. So we need a motion.
So moved. Puerto Rico is that's in his birthday. Second.
All in favor. So presiding member Puerto Rico, you can call the meeting to order.
This is call me to order. Approval agenda items.
There are no late.
Maybe the whole meeting of August 15th be covered. Dr. King, Dr. Chung. Adoption of minutes from the committee of the whole meeting minutes of July 25th, 2023. Dr. King, carried. Business rights, petitions and delegations, the Students Events Alliance.
Who's gonna make the presentation?
There's 3 of us.
The 3 of us.
Okay.
Okay, you're ready to
Yeah, we're ready to
go.
go.
And just here, okay, or up here? And at this angle, so my back set up you. Anyways, good morning, everyone. And I'm Shirley Baker. And I am with the Osoyoos Festival Society. I'm the treasurer. And I wanted to take a minute to thank the town of Osoyoos for over the years, like 25+ years, where you have supported Osoyoos festivals. We wouldn't exist without that, so thank you. There will be 3 of us presenting today. And I'll just call up the ones that no, the areas that we're representing, sorry. Cactus Jalopies, Osoyoos Festival Society, Osoyoos and District Arts Council, Osoyoos Farmers Market Society, Osoyoos Music in the Park Association, Wide Arts National Association, and Wine Country Racing. So we tried to get a representative to come to the meeting this morning from each one of those. We have a few, but like we missing a couple. But in our meetings, in our alliance meetings, that's the group that has showed up. So thank you for making the time to hear our presentation and allowing for 2-way communication. So something you want to put off, just talk, I don't answer a question, whole thing.
5 minutes.
Within 5 minutes here, or
Yes, Giraffe Mayor, so it's 5 minutes, but we've seen that there's 3 presenters, you can get 15 for the 3. so we can draw it.
Yeah, yeah.
And off every-
Okay, yeah. So we are the people in Osoyoos who produce the famous Canada Day Parade, day-long festivities at Gyro Park. We produce Easter fun festivities for the family, the Christmas parade, the January 1st desert dip in the lake, the free live music concerts in Gyro Park all summer long. We produce the All Hallows Festival, the Pride Festival, drag races at our airport, summer and winter farmers markets, the famous car show along the waterfront, a piano in Gyro Park for all to play, street dances at Gyro Park for families, music festivals, winter and fall indoor concerts, dances, art shows, and Christmas markets. So that group produces a lot of things. We are volunteers, unlike many other volunteer groups who serve their membership. Our mandates are to provide family-oriented events for others, for visitors to our town, as well as residents of Osoyoos. We do this because we love our community. Many of us are retired and we bring our years of skills and expertise to the table. Having been program managers, accountants, writers, community developers, researchers, mechanics, entrepreneurs, and so on. We now can make time to give back to our community. If you have ever been a volunteer, you know that there is volunteer overlap. Some of us volunteer in a couple of groups. We're a special breed and there are fewer and fewer of us around. Thank you for your time. And now we'll have Dan.
Morning, my name is Jen Whitaker. I am with White Arts National Association. I'm here to tell you a little bit about our Events Alliance. So the Events Alliance was formed a few years ago, and the reason why we formed it was because we shared some of the same requests, needs, and challenges when we're working with the town to coordinate the events that we produce. We decided that it would be a good idea to collaborate with town staff to make sure that we're streamlining communication and sharing resources well amongst all of the groups that we represent. To that end, we've worked on streamlining a few items with the way that logistics work between ourselves and also the town. So now we have a single point of contact with the town with whom we make arrangements. And this could include things like chairs, bleachers, lights on the band shell, turning off sprinklers, replacing light bulbs, unlocking electrical boxes, and so on. Previously, we'd asked for and now have a fixed deadline for funding RMI and community grant applications. And the reason why we requested an earlier deadline for funding decisions is because many of the events that we produce take up to a year to plan and then execute. At our last meeting with town officials, we also asked for clarity on the priorities for funding and also to get a better idea of transparency around the decision.
Morning, my name is Dana St. Louis. I'm with the Joyce Music in a Park and the Farmers Market Society. So why are we here to talk to you today, you're wondering? Of course, we first wanted to share that we're thankful for the improvements in the process and the improved communication, and we're thankful for funding support so far. And as you're going through your budget process now, we want to openly discuss the challenges our volunteer organizations continue to face. So we're here to discuss money. To produce our public events, we need increased funding. We survive on grants and fundraising to operate, but money is getting harder to access. Grants are becoming more and more competitive, and they're targeting more specific types of client groups or groups of people, of which we're often not eligible. Osoyoos is so fortunate to be one of the 14 communities able to receive the Resort Municipality Initiative funds. We know that the usual $473,000 that Osoyoos receives from the province is not guaranteed forever, although it's been around since 2005. But while it's still available, we want you to know that especially since COVID, our costs have been increasing, whether it's the rental of equipment, liability insurance, or services that we need to hire. In some cases, our costs have doubled in those areas. Our other funding sources are also becoming more difficult or impossible to access. So for our groups here to be able to continue producing these free public events, we're asking if you would consider increasing your allocation, which is 9% of your RMI budget towards events, to 22%. The provincial policy permits an RMI recipient to spend up to 30%, which would be in this case $135,000 of your allocation on events. The line object referred to in the budget as visitor activity enhancement. Having accountants and financial program administrators in our midst is handy. Ours have been reviewing the town's annual budget document, and we are aware of the 1 million RMI carryover in funds, approximately 1 million. And so it certainly appears that this ask is very possible.
As an example, 450,000 of the carryover, which was spent in the previous years, of the RMI funds have been allocated to the proposed plaza by the DMO. And just weeks ago, the RMI allocation of that 1 million project was 300,000. Perhaps the added $150,000 will not be spent by the end of the year and could be allocated to our events. So our ask, Mayor and Council, is for you to consider increasing your budgeted events allocation from 25,000, of which in the past it's been 40,000, so it's actually gone down. So asking it to be increased from 25,000 by another 75,000 to a total of 100,000, so that all of our volunteer organizations can continue to put on our amazing free events for visitors and residents of all ages. We close by saying that we enjoy our work, we put in long hours, and we believe that our events make Soils a more enjoyable, fun place to live. We're all about bringing positive energy to this town, and we want to work together to make our community a more pleasant place to live and visit. Thank you very much for your consideration, and we'd be happy to answer any questions or clarify things if you like.
So we're vote, Councilor Bennett and Mayor Cronin.
No, I'm good.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. I appreciate all the work that all of the volunteers do. And thank you for putting the presentation together.
Thank you.
I don't use I pick up all of those.
Second first, House Accelerator Fund. Other assistance here today.
Thank you very much, Mayor Puerto Rico. Sorry, that's stumbling over that, the mayor threw me off there a bit, but Dan Penner is here from Urban Systems. I believe Dan is going to be doing the presentation, and Darcy, you get to hear from you as well. This is super. Okay, you can step up to the mic and then just ask Amy to forward the slides when you're ready.
Okay, perfect.
Okay, thanks so much.
I don't know, should I use the microphone? It's pretty easy, it's better to use the microphone. I'm a tall person, right? So I can adjust. We're good now? All right. Well, it's great to meet all of you. I think this is the first time I've had the chance to interact with you. I had a lot of chance to chat with you and build some familiarity here in the town of Soils. So I just want to give a quick presentation on the Housing Accelerator Fund, just to give you an overview of like the program, the application that we're supporting, Soils and putting in, talk a little bit about some of the initiatives that we've included, which I think are really pragmatic, practical, projects that can support, accelerated rates of housing development here in the community. So, yeah, it's really just to give you an overview, give you a chance to learn more about the work that we're doing, the application that's going in, ask questions, provide feedback before we move to the submission date, which is this Friday, which is coming up very quickly. So yeah, just moving on to the next slide for introduction. So again, I'm a community strategic planner and partner with Urban Systems. I'm based in Kelowna. A lot of what I do is more focused on broader community planning, strategic planning, helping really communities solve whatever the problem is. And that could be like a housing focused problem, economic development, land use, infrastructure. So I'm based in Kelowna, recently relocated, but I've spent a lot of my lifetime here in the Okanagan and just really excited at the opportunity to start working here in Soils. I'm here with my colleague Darcy, and I'll just let him give a quick overview of himself.
Hi, greetings. Nice to meet everyone. My name is Darcy. I've been with Urban Systems for 2 years now. Previously worked with some smaller communities that are tourism based in Canmore and in Nelson. And yeah, happy to be collaborating with the Soyuz and with the planning department. We can pop to the next slide there. So I'd like to give just a brief introduction about the HAP Housing Accelerator Fund grant overview. And then I'll pass it back over to Dan to discuss some of the initiatives which we've been working through with Gina. So the HAP program is a CMHC administered program, and there's $4 billion available in funding. Now, this is a national program. It is there's some competitive nature to it. So we will be drafting the plan, the HAP application with that in mind. The goal of the program is to create 100,000 new units across Canada. And it's an incentive-based funding that's flexible to the context of the community. So all the initiatives that will be crafting, which Dan will go over, are very much Soyuz focused. And the initial round of funding will promote this accelerated housing development nationally. So some of the goals are to get homes built faster, to speed up the process of building approvals, to develop complete communities and develop affordable, inclusive, equitable, and diverse communities. So, and then finally, to develop low carbon and climate resilient communities, which of course is Soyuz with the recent fire in the region, quite important. You can see the next slide there. So just to give a brief overview about the grant submission and the program requirements. Soyuz has a housing assessment completed within the past 2 years. So many communities do not, and so it's great that Soyuz has that lined up already. And part of the action plan is to develop 5 to 7 initiatives that would promote housing development in Soyuz. We'll develop a baseline housing projection, which we'll go over a little bit later in the presentation. And large part of the project is to commit to a growth housing target over the next 3 years. And we'll be upon hopeful success of the application. Part of the process is to submit regular reports and status updates to show that Soyuz is keeping in step with the projections that were outlined. So the action plans are evaluated based on improving permitting timelines, being long-term and incenting units in the long term, impacting a large portion of developable land and applicable land, and impacting a high number of projects, improving development, predictability and stability in the town, and presenting the potential of improving the broader housing system. So I'll pass it over to Dan for a little bit more information about HAP and to go over the incentives.
So like a really good way to think of this program, like really what its focus is saying, based on how conditions are right now, like, our planning approval system, our OCP, our zoning programs that we have in place to help incentivize development. This is kind of the baseline, like business as usual, the amount of like homes that we would build over the next 3 years. This project is about we have our baseline, but if we go and provide resources to, a municipality to go and put in the, updated tools, policies, procedures, processes, incentive programs, like do the work necessary to like really incentivize and help enable like higher rates of development, what would that accelerated rate be? So as part of this project, we have to create like a baseline scenario that says, based on how things are going right now, these are how many homes we could expect to be built in Soyuz over the next 3 years. But if we do these projects, that will just create like more favorable conditions for housing development. This is what we think we could achieve. And for all of the units that go above and beyond that, like kind of standard rate of development, there's like a huge financial incentive that comes with it to the community. And we'll talk about that in a sec. So really, again, like all of these action plans, it's really just to like create higher rates of development in the community. And then if we can show or tie those back to the actual amount of, units that are being built above and beyond your kind of standard rate, like, it's really flexible dollars to invest in things like capital infrastructure, parks, financial housing incentives. It's pretty broad, so, we can go to the next slide here. So in terms of funding, like communities that do get into the program, there's kind of like this initial round of funding that goes to cover all of the, action items or the projects that are included in the application. So for example, and I'll talk more about this later in the presentation. One of the projects we're looking at is, updating, your, planning frameworks, so your OCP zoning, development permit areas to be more conducive to infill and missing middle type development. So that's an example of a project. Initial funding comes to that, and we have 3 years to like kind of complete this list of projects. We got to report on it. And there's like budgets for each that are included in the application form. Where the secondary funding comes in place, as I was saying before, this program is all about show us that you did the work necessary to like achieve higher rates of housing development in your community. And if we can show that, there's like top-up funding, which is anywhere between $20,000 and $40,000 per unit that goes above and beyond your baseline. That doesn't apply to single family homes. It applies to missing middle homes, infill housing, multifamily housing, affordable housing, social housing, like secondary suites. And that funding amount increases like, 20,000 per baseline, but if it's an affordable unit, you get a little bit extra. So that money, like that top-up funding, can be reinvested back into infrastructure, programs, things that are tied back to housing development in the community. So an example might be, we put in the action plan, housing just, skyrockets, we get this top-up funding. Well, we can use that money actually to maybe extend our water, sewer, and stormwater infrastructure to service a new part of the community. We can invest that money into like revitalizing like an underutilized green space, because we know it's going to help facilitate like higher density developments around it. Like it's very flexible, and one of the things that we have to outline in our application is generally like how would we use these secondary funds? Like what are kind of the big, ticket items that we would like to put these funds to? But again, it has to be tied back to housing. Has to be tied back to facilitating housing development. So yeah, this is just more on like the actual funding methodology, and it is like a little complicated, but there's great breakdowns. Like you go on the CMHC website and download like the program kind of background report or application resource guide. So again, there's like a base funding. It's $20,000 per additional unit. So let's say, we expect to build 10 units per year, but we actually build 20, that's $200,000. Where you get additional funding, again, is an affordable housing unit. There's a bonus for that as well. So like, again, it can get up to $40,000 per unit. It also puts a great incentive here, like on the town to, if you have like, a project or there's momentum, let's say in a BC housing project in the community, like that's where you could really capitalize on that. Like if you can get a project permitted in the next 3 years, doesn't have to be built, but the permit has to be approved. So again, 3 years to get that going. Go to the next slide. In addition, like this program also aligns with like the complete community grants that a lot of municipalities in BC have been submitting on. So I don't believe you put one in for the intake that was in the summer. I don't think. But there is another intake coming in the new year, and there's a lot of overlap between the work that can be done through the Complete Communities Grant and the Housing Accelerator Fund project. So really all this, is to say that, in the future, if you do decide to submit on a Complete Communities Grant, like there is a lot of overlap between projects, and just to consider that, like if you can develop your application. And there again, lots of opportunity to like share resources in a way between both funding programs in doing the work. Next slide. So action plans, again, this is like the most important part of the like Housing Accelerator Grant application process. As Darcy was saying, these projects, if you put the application in and you get funded, like you're committing to doing the work, right? Like, so it's really important that like the work that we include totally aligns with, what the community here needs, where the opportunities are, where there maybe are some gaps that could be addressed. And we've been, working with Gina to flesh this out. So some of the initial action items or projects that we've included or are reflecting on the application include really creating like the policy necessary to enable infill and missing middle development in a way that's again context sensitive to like the existing character of the community. You know, in doing so, like that would involve like consultation with the community, or we want to make sure that what we enable is going to be, you know, accepted, you know, more broadly in the community. We want to understand like the areas that we, you know, apply these new policies or guidelines to are, you know, conducive to infill development or suitable for it. As well as like updating, you know, the development permit area DPAs that you have in place to then align with that. This also feathers into like comprehensive zoning bylaw updates. And I know like you're going through all of this stuff right now. So it's really just about adding some additional resources to focus on infill housing, missing middle housing, which is really like the core focus, or I'd say the core focus of the housing accelerator fund. Like they want to see those types of housing be built. And if you can build those types of housing, like that's where the big financial incentives are going to come across. You know, as Darcy was saying before, these projects have to have like a wide scope. Like we can't just look at, you know, one property and as an action plan say like, let's create like a, you know, a site plan for, you know, developing this, or understand like how to service the site to develop it. It has to touch on the whole community as best as possible to score the highest. So one of the items is also looking at a land acquisition and disposition policy. So not only, you know, what is our policy for disposing of surplus municipal lands that are maybe like really preferential for housing, but if we want to make acquisitions, whether it's like, let's say there's some crown land within our municipal boundary that's attractive for future development, like what's the actual policy behind going and acquiring it? And through that work, we can actually like do some assessment work, like, you know, how would we develop it? Does it make sense? Are the conditions favorable? Is there servicing in place? What would the cost be if they're not? Like we can feather that work in, but again, the policy has to touch the whole community. Another one, and this is a really interesting opportunity. I don't think very many communities in Canada are going to have an item like this. But it's, you know, sitting down with the Soyuz Indian Band and establishing a memorandum of understanding, which is a non-binding legal agreement. It's like a friendship agreement over how we're going to work together to develop housing at a regional scale here. So within their community here in Soyuz, and they're also landowners, like they own property within their municipal boundary. I believe it's been converted to reserve. So an MOU would look at like, you know, how do we work together to service these lands? How do we work together to like facilitate housing development? I've done this type of agreement with many communities in BC. Funders like to hear it. It's a great story about communities coming together to address, you know, regional issues. And I don't think there's going to be any applications in this country that have that type of project. So I think it's like a bit of a wedge as well, and a great opportunity for you to continue building your relationship with your neighbor next door. Another project that we have identified is just doing an update to your subdivision and servicing bylaw, and that's just to account for, we're going to allow different types of, you know, housing that maybe we haven't seen here in the community. We want to make sure that, you know, when developers come and they build it, that it's going to be serviced appropriately. And maybe our existing standards don't totally line up with like new infill development. So it's just really about tweaking and modifying and updating that. And I'll give an example. In Kelowna, you've seen, you know, all these little fourplexes and little townhome developments that are happening in like single family areas. They didn't have proper servicing requirements for stormwater, right? Because like there's no absorption, right? So there's been some stormwater challenges in some of those projects. And we're actually updating their subdivision and servicing bylaw to account for that. So it's really just making sure that your servicing requirements align with, you know, these new types of development that you may see in the community. And then the last one is a rental incentive or rental housing incentive package. So that's looking at, you know, all of the tools that we're given through the community charter, the local government act, from, you know, density bonusing and like, you know, DCC, like waivers on, you know, affordable housing projects to community revitalization, you know, bylaws. Like what are the tools that we have at our disposal to facilitate housing that we want to see, which is, you know, rental housing, affordable housing, maybe even some forms of market housing. But again, creating like an incentive package that would also probably end up in the development of a bylaw to support it. And then other projects too, like, you know, asset management. If you wanted to do an asset management plan, that's an example of a project that can help promote the sustainability of your entire housing system by ensuring that your infrastructure is maintained, renewed, replaced, in a really proactive and well thought out manner. So there's a lot of flexibility here. But the key components of this work is it has to touch the broadest spectrum of the community as possible. It has to, be connected directly to creating more housing supply, but also the system piece to ensure that there's like long-term, stability and sustainability of like the entire housing system here in Soyuz. So for each one of those projects in the application, there's like a list of steps, milestones, budgets, deliverables. It's all fleshed out. But we're still working through it. And if you have any feedback on, maybe some projects that you feel can really, again, help accelerate housing development in the community. Again, we're all open for it. We still have a few days here to wrap up the application. So housing targets. We'll scroll to the next one. As I was saying before, how the program works, we have to based on your permitting for the last, 10 years, what is kind of the average? And not just the average in total, but how many multifamily permits are you issuing? How many single family permits are you issuing? How many secondary suite permits are you issuing? And we have to project that for the next 3 years. And then create another projection that says, this is actually what we're going to strive to achieve by doing all this work. And then the funding again is based on how close we get to that target. So I'll just flip it back maybe to Darcy quick. So he put together these permit tables here, and I'll just run through them quickly.
Thanks, Ed. So we put together this data based on data from BC Stats, and this is all the building permit information for the last 10 years. So the way that we're putting together the projections is based on this data, and just to know that it is building permit data, not buildings that are being built. And the reason that we have that 10-year average rather than, let's say, the last 2 or 3 years is, well, the pandemic. There was, as you can see down in the third table there in the missing middle, there's quite a large spike in 2021, 2022 of missing middle units compared to the previous 8 years or so. So it's important that we chose the 10-year average rather than a 5-year average, for example, so that we're not overcommitting the town of Soyuz to units that are not would likely not be permitted and would put you in a position of not being able to hit those targets. So we are being a little bit flexible with how we've with how we're choosing to put together our projections, and the 10-year average is what we've chosen to go with. And well, like Dan was saying, when we put together those projections, they are projections that the town would be held to, and that we would have to be reporting on a yearly basis, I believe. So just wanted to go through those because they do sort of form the foundation of this application.
Any question there? Can you just explain to me what missing building permits are, like a little broad term, what that means?
Through the chair to Councillor King, missing middle building permits are row housing or apartment, basically not single family homes. In the second there we have single.
I guess the problem with the top two is just the bottom one. I'm trying to understand it.
Yes. So the missing middle would be multifamily units, row housing, more dense forms of.
Is that because you identified some land that could possibly be built with this type of development? How do you come up with this number?
Sure. Yeah. So these numbers are actually town, what you permitted. This comes from your building development statistics. So the missing middle, that's just a term that we use for basically anything that's not a single family dwelling. Low-rise apartment blocks, townhomes, duplexes. That's when we say missing middle, that's what it is. Basically anything between a single family building and a high density skyrise, a super tall, right? It's that middle section. And there's a big focus in Canada on trying to provide those forms of housing, so it's not just single family and skyscrapers, like we have that middle section. So because of Soyuz, like you don't have any like high-rise multi-family buildings, everything's, 3 to 5 stories or townhomes or walk-ups. We just consolidated that into the missing middle, and those are the actual like units that have been brought online. As you see in 2022, like 117 units were permitted here in the town, 62 in 2001, which is like, look at the years before that, 6, 7, 8, 1, really was like an anomaly, which is, as Darcy was saying, why we're taking the tenure, because if we were to take the last 3, it would just be not consistent with how the community's been growing over the last decade.
I appreciate that. I guess I just got bogged down in the word missing, we missed opportunity.
Yes, sorry, I think for that, it's just planning lingo for,
There's a new word there.
yeah. So just planning lingo for anything that's not a single family home and anything that's not like a high rise apartment building or condo building. But you can scroll down to the next slide here. So as I was saying, like, there's kind of this, 20 grand that you can get if you, permit an additional home above and beyond like what your standard rate would be. But if you can permit like, an affordable unit, like let's say, BC Housing comes in and they build 20 affordable units. That go above and beyond like what they typically would, like the baseline. It's another $19,000 on top of the 20,000. Right, so that's 39 grand per unit, so multiply that by 20, I'm not gonna do the mental math in my head, but like, that's significant resources that can come back to the town to like invest in infrastructure and other things that can continue housing development. Go to the next slide. So, yeah, really, like, in terms of next steps, like, we're just refining out, like, the action plans, the projections. It gets really technical, like, there's a lot of math involved, like, for each of these action items, we're gonna develop, amendments to your OCP and zoning bylaw to help missing middle, like infill. Like we have to attach a number that says, based on this, we anticipate an additional 10% of units to be built, and that's going to equal this. And there's like a formula behind it. So we're just fleshing that all out, putting it into the online application. So there's an online form or kind of portal that we fill out through Canadian Housing Mortgage or CUHC. So Gina's given us the ability to go and include it for the town. And just to like move it, how you get this done in advance of Friday. So we have till midnight Friday, and like we'll be done this on Friday afternoon. And yeah, it's just a great opportunity. So it is a very competitive program. I was in Ontario for work a few weeks ago, and like the city of North Bay is talking about it, like the city of Sault Ste. Marie is talking about it. Like a lot of communities are involved in this, but the stream is separated. So there's a small community stream, which is communities like under 10,000, and there's a large community stream, like an urban stream, which is communities over 10,000. So you're part of the rural stream, which will have its own kind of pot. So really, like the competition is based off of like other small communities that are applying. Like you're not going up against like the city of Vancouver or Kelowna, right? And yeah, it's just a great opportunity. So yeah, we're excited to help you, and yeah, hoping that we put together like the strongest application possible and help advance what I know is like a really important priority here in the community, and that's just getting units up. So that's all I had for today. I'm happy to take any questions, comments.
Thank you, Mr. Just one question. I guess you're working closely with Ms. McKay planning.
Yeah.
And I presume she's gonna vet it before you submit it on a kind of our behalf.
Yeah.
Yes, absolutely.
Okay, thanks. Well, I mean, you're submitting, I have no idea what's on the paper.
Yeah, and like, so we have like Word templates of all the online forms, so we fill that all out and then we put that over, to the town to kind of go through and just verify, make sure that everyone's on the same board or on the same page. Yeah, and then we submit, and the decisions I think will probably be made late in the fall, early winter on who was successful in getting the program.
Thank you. Does this grant program, does it affect any of the housing starts that we've already got in place and that we've approved, or does it have to be for new ones?
It has to be for like new permits that come after like the program. And again, you have to be able to tie it back to the work that was done. So for example, like if we, let's say like we start, like you get in and September 1st, we start doing like, you know, one of the action items, and in that same month, like you issue a permit for, you know, multifamily housing development. Like that probably wouldn't count because it's not tied back to the program. But let's say like in 2 years, you know, through the work that you've done, like BC Housing comes in and acquires like, you know, municipal property and they develop, you know, then it's, you know, you can connect it back to the work that you've done and get the, you know, the funding for that. So yeah, like it won't cover or won't be tied to anything that's already been done. It's all about looking forward in the future.
Thank you.
That's good.
Yes, thank you very much. I guess my question is, of how, sorry, the urban systems gets paid. I'm just wondering how, if we're only gonna, it's gonna save $20,000, $19,000 a home, for example, and you say put a permit in for 3 of the homes up in Meadowlark, and you get that $60,000, what's it costing us to submit this permit? Is it based on, are you getting paid on if we're successful? Or are you getting paid repaying for a permit, hoping we get some money?
Thank you, Councillor Bennett, through the chair. Just to clarify first, the funding isn't available, to incentivize, single family homes. So projects like the Meadowlark project that we have currently ongoing, wouldn't qualify. So at this particular juncture, Urban Systems is being paid to put together the submission to the CMHC, HAF program. So if we're successful in obtaining funds through the program, we would look at next steps. So I think in our particular case, if we're entering into the program, one of the opportunities we really have that we've already spoken about is a BC housing project on town-owned land. So that is a good opportunity for us to achieve additional funds. After that project is approved by the province, we'd then be eligible for that up to $19,000. As I understand it, if it's an affordable housing project, we would get the 20 plus the 19. That's just an example of where we might be able to obtain funding.
Thank you.
Okay.
Questions? Thank you, Dan. Thank you, Darcy, for presenting today.
Thank you, appreciate your time, and yeah, look forward to talking and working with all of you in the future.
Next, 2024-2028 draft budget, from the Director of Financial Services.
Thank you. I'm just gonna let our CEO start off with this and then I'll take over after that.
Yeah, thank you, presiding officer. Presiding member. Yeah, just start off with some opening remarks and just for the viewers out there, I think it's important to reiterate that, you know, it's important to note that council has 3 main priorities, and it's to establish policy and bylaws, for the budget, and thirdly, maybe most importantly, is looking long-term at the municipality and what and setting strategic direction. This past year has been very productive. The council has established a strategic priorities chart, as well as infrastructure priorities chart. The administration has provided council with critical information regarding asset management plans for water and sewer, as well as fleet management. Plans for buildings, streets, recreation, and non-potable water. Those are broad, more terms. You know, recreation includes our parks and trails. As far as streets, that also include their sidewalks and their storm sewers. We'll just include them in broad terms. They'll be done over the next couple of years. Provincial and federal governments have been pushing municipalities to do and implement these plans for some time, and not doing so and will continue to impact the town's ability to obtain grants, which are vital to our ongoing infrastructure requirements. The asset management plans for water, wastewater are very clear that there's no alternative but to start replacing the critical infrastructure now. The financial impacts to users will be significant, but there's no alternative other than to replace and borrow as pieces of the infrastructure fail. This unplanned approach would not only cost significantly more, but will also create significant hardships on the community. Public Service Accounting Board has implemented a new standard, which in effect means we must have reserves sufficient enough to remove buildings and infrastructure and reclaim the site at the end of its life. The administration will need to conduct reviews of our assets and provide estimates, which will need to be incorporated in the budget. This will result in a financial impact of likely $2 to $4 million, although we don't have an exact number at this stage, but we will need to do that work over the next year or so. The current financial situation is not conducive to sustainable municipality. However, plans currently in place and those that are being contemplated in the next few years will provide a framework that will provide the required replacement and maintenance of our infrastructure, which 5,500 residents and businesses count on every day, as well as hundreds of thousands of tourists that visit our community annually. It is important to note that the required financial commitment is substantial and will undoubtedly create hardship on some property owners and their tenants. However, it is also important to note that our taxes and utilities have been significantly less than a typical residential dwelling within the valley for a prolonged period of time, which in effect has contributed to our infrastructure deficit, which now needs to be recouped. The subsidy was about $800 per year. Unfortunately, this now means our taxes and utilities will need to increase above the average to make up for the difference. We also need to deal with the substantial inflationary increases that have occurred over the last couple of years, which creates significant uncertainty in our plan due to the age and condition of our assets. Delaying projects for any period of time will definitely significantly increase our risks of infrastructure failures. We are in a situation which is unavoidable and will result in scrutiny from our residents and businesses. On the positive side, the steps are being taken to provide a positive long-term outlook for infrastructure, which our customers rely on every day. Also, directly preparing a budget earlier in the year will provide our businesses and residents with advance notice as to what potential tax impact there may be for the upcoming year. The direction provided today will assist administration with preparing the budget for September, which is definitely a lot earlier than previous, but again, will provide our property owners and utility owners with the direction for 2024. And it's important to know council will still have the ability to amend the budget when it's presented in September, but today will provide administration with some directions that we can be more efficient in providing budget documents in the next couple of weeks. So having said that, we're now looking forward to receiving some feedback on some proposed numbers that basically include work that has been done over the past year that council has been privy to over the last few months, as well as our public. And at the end of the day, numbers that are in this document today represent the facts that have been provided here. So thank you very much.
Thank you. So what we've got is to highlight for council is on our operational budget decreases for 2024. Our municipal tax increase, we're looking at a 5.88% increase. Policing, we're looking at 11.70% increase. That's mostly because of the retroactive payments that we have to make for the policing salaries. Fire protection was going down by 0.14%. Garbage and recycling was going up by 5.84%. Sewer was going up by 4.97% and water by 10.67%. So just the operating increases alone for general water and sewer, we were looking at an annual increase of $158.49 for an average single family residence of $13.21 a month. In 2023, the sustainability fund was established to begin savings for future infrastructure replacement. And in 2023, we had the general sustainability fund of $180,603, which was $44.52 per year. Sewer sustainability fund of $231,300, which is a $40 allocation per year, and the water sustainability fund, which was $183,690, which was a $30 per annum increase. The budget figures illustrated in this report for water sewer fleet incorporate the funding requirements of their asset management plans for transportation, roads, sidewalks, storm drains, street lighting, etc., recreations, parks, trails, washrooms, etc., buildings, public works, North Center Town Hall, Arts Council, Desert Park, and non-potable water still need to be developed and incorporated into the budget. To address our infrastructure deficit, the town is looking at significant increases to allow the municipality to have enough funds available when existing infrastructure needs replacing. The areas where the town now has received plans are referenced below. The sewer asset management plan received in June of 2023 states that the recommended level of funding for 2024 is an increase of $18.93 a month for an average single family residence. This will increase revenues by $1,323,300, which is a 59.81% or $227.16 annual increase for sewer user fees. The water asset management plan, which was received in May of 2023, states the recommended level of funding for 2024 is an increase of $31.41 a month for an average single family residence. This will increase revenues by $2,311,966 and is an 82.02% increase for $376.92 for an increase in water user fee. Our vehicle fleet assessment and replacement strategy. This report was received January 2022 and stated that there needs to be $426,000 in annual funding to replace the current operational fleet. Currently, we're setting aside $70,130, and to fully fund the annual required property tax would need to increase by $355,870, which is 11.14% increase or $87.40 per year for that. Our vehicle fleet assessment replacement strategy for fire protection received in January 2022 as well states that there needs to be $338,000 in annual funding for replacing the current fire department fleet. Currently, we're not setting aside any funding. To fully fund the annual requirement for fire protection, we need to increase it by $338,000, which is about a 52.28% increase and $89.33 per year increase to the average single family resident. It's important to know that the completed asset management plans were high level, therefore do not reflect the condition of smaller assets that may need to be replaced as part of our regular maintenance schedule. Borrowing on capital projects. Currently, in the 2024 to 2028 sewer budget, a total of $2.7 million will need to be borrowed in 2025, with the borrowing over a 20-year period at the current prescribed rate of 4.25%. Where the sewer fees would need to be increased by $209,248. For the water fund in 2024 to 2028 budget, we have a total of $9,300,000 that will need to be borrowed, $6.3 million in 2024 and $3 million in 2026. Our significant future budget impacts. The following areas we are currently working on asset management plans for and compiling the information for the future impacts to the town is transportation for roads, sidewalks, storm drains, recreations, parks and trails, buildings, and what was alluded to earlier by our CAO, the PSAP 3280 requirements. During the 2023 budget deliberations, it was recommended that council that we establish the sustainability fund and increase taxes by 5% over the next 5 years. At this time, and with the future cost of inflation on capital projects, administration is recommending that 5% increase in municipal taxes to increase the general sustainability fund. This would raise an additional $159,781. Building this fund can also assist with greater financial flexibility. Our reserve funds, we have current reserve funds in our general fund of $11 million. In our sewer fund, $1.3 million, and our water fund, $3 million. At the end of the projected 2028 budget, our general fund would have been reduced down to $7.8 million. Our sewer reserve fund would have increased slightly to $1.8 million, and our water fund would have increased to $6.4 million. So on the last page is where administration is now seeking council direction. This is the proposed changes and the referenced below. We've got our municipal taxation at a 5.88%. That's the operating increase. We've got the recommended vehicle fleet funding, which is $87.40 increase. We got our funding requested in for transportation, recreation, and building of $39.20. Continue with the additional sustainability fund of $36.82. And the PSAP 3280 requirement, which is estimated at a $61.39 increase. Should I stop right there to let council start to deliberate or just ask questions?
Sure, I think at any time, I think the thing that administration is looking forward to is hearing kind of feedback from council. And the way the table is designed is that the first 3/4 of it, well, first half, first of all, on the operating side, and is pretty much includes our typical operating increases with some adjustments associated with vehicle fleet funding and a start on the PSAP requirements. So maybe this is a good time to see if there's questions on that general operating piece. Again, these are pretty much required to be embedded in the budget and only address one asset management fund. So I'll get good time to get some feedback on that piece.
I guess I don't ask the question. I think it was in there. When I look at your different assessment management plans and look at those numbers, there are different percentages that what's in your charts. I'm just trying to understand why it's the difference. You can pick it up.
Yeah, I'm just looking at the one. I was picking on the sewer asset management fund, and I got $1.3 million increase, 59.81% increase. That one's,
Yeah, if I look at the sewer chart, it says 4.97.
so the 4.97 is the operational increase.
Okay.
So that's increases in wages, maintenance, as an example, the sewer operational increases included $10,000 for training, wages of $55,130. Major maintenance was added into there because of all the small maintenance items that are not included in a asset management fund of $50,000. And they request to increase the contingency from 30,000 to 50,000. So that's what makes up that 4.97% for sewer. It's very similar when we talk about water training.
Yeah, I understand.
Okay. So the operational one is,
And then what about all the deficiencies? Is there any look at, we need more money for all, you got 4 or 5 deficiencies on your big chart.
yeah, so these are all the other deficiencies are basically funding for the asset replacement that we need to start saving those fundings for. So it's allocating them towards the categories where we would collect the taxes from. So under municipal taxes would be our vehicle fleet funding. Under water, we're talking about water asset management.
Now I go down to the bottom section, you talk efficiencies, transportation, road sidewalks and stuff. So how are we gonna make up this 1.3 million?
But
Maybe I don't know.
okay, the 1.3 million is only that one line item in the sewer fund. The other 6 items that were not included on those totals are other areas where we see that we do still have deficiencies where we don't know those numbers yet. So we're just guessing at a number that council may wish to put money away for.
Okay, so they're not really in budget at this time, it's just that.
Those ones aren't, no.
So maybe I can just add a couple pieces. So how the chart is designed is the first third, which has municipal taxation in bold, policing, fire protection, garbage and recycling, is pretty much our operating expenses, and it has incorporated some asset management associated with fleet management and some preliminary PSAP requirements. We then move into both the sewer and water fund, which those numbers include the asset management plan, which council has been privy to over the last month or two. So in order for our sewer and water funds to be sustainable, those numbers administration is seeking direction on, and yet those increases would be in position us well to deal with our infrastructure deficit. As indicated a couple months ago, even improving these numbers, there's still significant risk associated with the continuance of those utilities because of the age of the infrastructure. But our engineer has put something together to at least attempt to deal with that asset infrastructure deficit. The bottom piece, other 2020, 2024 considerations is we know these asset management plans are underfunded. We've already got a taste of that from the 3 that have been completed. And so as we complete them over the next year or 2, we'll have more definitive numbers. But what we're trying to show in this table is that even though the situation is fairly critical right now, we know that in the next year or 2, there's going to be increased pressure on our budget. So depending on the appetite of council to deal with its complete asset deficiency, you may want to consider potentially approving the first 2/3 of the table, but knowing that next year there's still going to be significant increased pressure. So if you want to start alleviating some of those pressures that you're going to hear about in the next year or 2, and enable administration also to start planning projects linked to some of these infrastructure pieces, it may be prudent to actually start considering to put some additional funding towards those. You may recall a month or 2 ago, the presentation with 2 Engineering, they indicated we're starting to rip up roads to replace some of the pipes. May be beneficial to actually look at repaving that entire road. So there might be a benefit from a cost efficiency perspective to actually start saving for those repaving of roads. So does that somewhat help? So we're looking for direction. This is pretty much what you've heard over the last 8 months, incorporated in the first 2/3. The bottom third is known issues that are coming to council, but is nowhere near likely the amount required, but maybe a start to start addressing some of that infrastructure. Does that help?
I have a question. And in the top point, you have a contingent, capital contingency percentage, increase the tax. So we got a real issue with something in the bottom, where we use some of that money out of those contingency funds.
Ultimately, we have a capital contingency requested in both the sewer and the water funds.
Yeah.
So if it related to the sewer and water, yes, you would have that funding available to deal with that emergency repair or things of that nature.
It wasn't big roads or sidewalk.
That, no, we would never.
Okay.
My understanding is for the capital contingency, it's if the project were to skyrocket in costs, inflationary pressures, etc., then we have a little bit of wiggle room. And we're not caught off guard.
Correct.
The significant increase in inflation of projects, we've heard the past 8 months, a lot of projects coming in 30, 50, 100% over budgeted amounts. So that's the numbers that were put together in asset management plans were the best guesses. But again, it was a very high level overview, and there is likely additional pressures that are going to be put on replacing our infrastructure. So again, one of our administration's concern is council's going through this process. Everybody thinking there's enough funds there, but there's still significant risks associated with inflationary pressures. Plus, because our infrastructure is very old and a lot of it past our its expected life, there can be things that crop up during the next 5-10 years that require additional funding. So this just gives a little bit of a cushion in that regard.
Thank you. So the number of 1563.73, what's that based off of, the value of the average,
That's based off the average single family resident.
which would be priced at?
Well, because we've got user fees in there as well, it's hard to do it for nobody, right? We're looking at the sewer. $440. You got it there for me? Perfect. So the water increase is $638 a year. Sewer increase is $455 a year. So of that $1,563, $1,093 of that is water and sewer fees. For our, what have we got? So the balance then would be taxation, be it for leasing, general taxation. We're probably looking at, I have a mill rate, it's probably declining here.
Say quick now.
That's okay.
So the average typical home is about 730,000.
Yeah.
So the typical residence is about 730,000. That would be the increase. It's all the other additional factors that come into play behind the scenes, as far as the market value changes, etc. But that's like a rough estimate, giving some type of an indication as to what it would be. I mean, there's differences as far as commercial buildings and all that type of stuff. Some indication.
I'm just trying to get a ballpark figure of how this would affect kind of the more vulnerable population.
I just want to mention
the utility rates are flat.
Yeah,
So no matter what the value of your home is, your utility rates are basically being increased by $100 a year.
yeah,
So whether or not your house is worth $1.3 million or $20, you're getting $1,000.
Yeah, so that $563 is the one based on the assessed value of the property, so property but value less, of course, you pay less and ones pay more, so. It is a huge impact to our taxpayer, absolutely. Whether they afford it or not. So. Very nothing.
Let's go first. Member Croft.
Thank you. Yeah, it's a hard pill to swallow, but we know that taxation in Osoyoos has been far below a lot of the other communities. I think the CAO had a graph at one point showing how much less we do pay. It's going to be a big bite no matter what. But I would certainly be in favor of okaying the top 2/3 and just holding off on the bottom third for now. I know we need it, but I think we have to be a little bit flexible here in how much we put on the taxpayers right now, and we're all involved in this. So I understand it. I appreciate the fact that the CAO and the CFO have come forward with this at this point, because it takes a little bit of time to kind of get used to it and look through and understand why we've had to up things so much. So I'm okay with it. But that's just my opinion. I'm not sure what everybody else thinks.
Thank you. This is a little beyond my water counselor thing, but I happen to have some personal knowledge. The fire, I'm gonna make glasses on and off here. Fire fleet funding. Jim, is that number 335, is that new equipment costs, or is that the leasing cost?
That's new equipment cost, so that's the go ahead and chime in.
Well, just I guess kind of a point of order. I mean, the questions associated with the rest of the operating budget need to be answered or asked by other counselors. So it's, if your question pertains directly to water, then you can sit in your counselor role to ask those questions. You can as the typical ratepayer resident, submit questions associated with the rest of the operating budget.
Well, I have to know if something's wrong in this state, in this report, so.
Sorry, that's just, as a water counselor, that's where the boundaries are. And you can definitely bring.
That's fine.
Certainly.
Fine, that's fine.
Oh, Councilor Bennett.
Councilor Bennett, you're on mute, just a reminder.
my clock goes off and then it goes ding ding. To CFO Zackel through the chair, just a question on the, not contingency, but reserve funds. When we put money in the reserve funds and it builds up like we've been doing, and then we take and move it around. When we do this, setting up through the asset management plan, are those funds set aside directly for there? One. Number two is if we apply for a grant, we're saying with a big asset management, a lot of money in that reserve. And then the government comes back and says, we applied for a grant for that sewer, but you got $6 million saved in there for another rainy day. Does that affect at all our grant application? We have big reserves.
No, it doesn't at all as far as affecting grant applications. The province wants to see that the municipality has got their portion secured, be it from reserves, be it from establishing borrowing bylaws, those type of things. So, and included in their financial plan. So basically all of these reserve or asset management requests for increases and all of that gets added into the ebb and flow of the 5-year capital project. So the funding starts to get utilized, and what we've seen in the reserve balances based on what we had there is our general fund has gone down by 3.3 million after 5 years. Our sewer fund is actually starting to increase by $500,000 by the end of year 5. What we see is our reserve balances starting out and originally diving because that funding request that we've asked for is the average over a 20-year period. Because we got so many projects that are due to be done right now, we're taxing that by having to do projects. So we're seeing our reserve balance go like this. But as soon as year 3 hits, year 4 and 5, it's going right back up. And we should be in a much better position after year 5. And we're moving in the right direction. With the water fund, we're seeing our water reserves actually increase by $3 million after year 5. So this funding will get us much closer to where we should be moving forward. I hope I answered that question.
Yes, thank you very much.
So through the chair, Councilor, I just want to add something to that as well. Generally, we use grant funding to do improvements to the system that are regulatory changes, improvements that need to happen that we have no control over. So generally, grant funding is not influenced by our reserve balances because it's a change of regulatory requirement. And the grant funding is generally used to fund that project. Reserve funding, we continue to help maintain our existing infrastructure and fund our existing infrastructure. So the province would only be looking to our contribution, as Mr. Zackel said, of 20% or 30%, depending on the grant funding. But anything that's operationally or some existing infrastructure would still need to be funded by the municipality. I hope that helps.
Thank you.
Councilor King to the next one.
No. I do have one. Thank you. Property taxation rates have to be the same throughout the board, like regardless of the valuation of the property, right?
Yes, property taxes are calculated based on their assessment. So unfortunately, it's not flat rate. The only way we could consider something different would be a parcel tax, which then could be a flat rate against all the properties. So there is another alternative to that.
Okay.
Just to add on, that's on the residential side. There is the business side. We have some flexibility with the rate on the commercial business side. We have a policy in place that indicates roughly how much more a commercial property should pay relative to your residents. All properties are valued based on market value. exceptions to that through our agricultural properties and linear type property like, power. Residential and commercial businesses are based on market value and there's different rate of taxation on those. So you have some flexibility as far as the distribution between those two buckets.
The current multiplier is 1.6 times the residential rate for business taxes.
That in essence means for $1 million residential property, the million commercial business or property that's worth $1 million. The municipal portion of taxes associated with that commercial property will be 65% higher than the residential, higher than 1.65 times. It's 65% more.
Valuation on the same taxation rate then.
That's correct.
Gotcha.
Under terminate.
Counselor.
Well, I guess administration is interested in hearing some feedback, because our budget is all together. Water is usually different because we have water counselors, so we, I think the only thing we've heard to date, from one counselor is that, the top 2/3 is something that they're, semi in favor of supporting and not so much lower. I guess we're just looking for maybe a little bit more direction from council as a whole, or maybe you want to separate water. So Councillor Appleby can have his kind of getting words with, and then the rest of the budget from council.
Okay.
So just getting a little bit better direction, and it just saves a lot of time in our budget preparation. There's a lot of sheets, as you're well aware of, and so having a, you can always change your mind later, but knowing where you're gonna helps us.
Councillor Trump.
I think over the past 8 months, we've heard enough with asset management plans to basically know that this needs to happen. So I am in favor of the top 2/3. Yeah.
We'll discuss that by the time.
That's about, you're okay?
Yep.
Perfect, all right. Yeah, I agree.
You're on the terminate down. Yes, terminate.
Councillor King, Councillor Trump, all in favor?